Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. And as always, I ask you to subscribe, if you will, maybe support us on Patreon, like us, and something that I would just like to mention is that I'm now offering Reiki training for those of you who would like to teach Reiki, as well as Reiki for those of you who would like a Reiki session here in Pittsburgh. So you can just go to the website, yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com, and leave me some comments about what your wishes are. So today's guest, I'm very excited to have with us. Lindsey Van Wagner is an educator who tries to inspire clients to live with purpose, confidence, and courage. She's got a master's in nutrition education from American University, a BA in psychology from the University of Maryland, College Park, and she's in yoga teachers training. Or are you done with that now, Lindsey?
I'm done with yoga teachers training as
Okay.
of 2018. So I've been teaching yoga for a while, yeah.
Okay. As an author, speaker, instructor, and wellness advocate from the Washington, D.C. area, she's known for empowering clients to live with intention and purpose, drawing from a deep understanding of transformative change, psychological well-being, and her own journey through personal challenges and healing of the mind, body, and soul. And she's written this book that's on view here on YouTube, and we'll talk about that at length. But before we do that, let me mention the name of the book, Spirit Vigilante, Telling My Truth to Help You Live Yours. And boy, does she. One thing that always appeals to me about an author is when they make themselves vulnerable. And Lindsey is one to lay it all out on the table. So we'll get into the book in a bit. Lindsey, first, though, I'd like you to begin with your spiritual journey from childhood till now, and then we'll talk about what you're currently up to. So the mic's all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So, starting with childhood, I was raised Christian, went to Bible study, all of that. Felt pretty comfortable in my faith. And then I would say around high school, college, once I was introduced to the magic of alcohol, which seemed to ease my nerves and anxiety, I felt myself distancing from religion, distancing from any kind of faith, because the way I had interpreted the message, and this was just my interpretation, was that I would be kind of punished for what I did. So I put a wedge between my relationship with God because I was feeling so shameful about the way that I was living. So separated from that for a while, separated from all connection to anything of meaning, really. I call it my lost years, when I was just out and about being reckless. And so once I got sober in 2015, that kind of served as a launching pad back into spirituality, or to spirituality for the first time, because I was more religion based before. And so I was able to choose a higher power of my own understanding and kind of think about the ways I would want that power to support me. And it wasn't in a judgmental way that I had for some reason perceived my other concept. So that's when it really started. And then I started getting into yoga, into wellness, into just open to so many different modalities. I run a wellness studio now in Rockville, and we have a shaman. And so she does spiritual journeys and shamanic medicine, Reiki, energy healing. So I'm just open to anything now at this point that connects me to that source or spirit. So that's my kind of 30,000 foot view of everything, but feel free to poke around where you're interested.
Okay, well, uh, I'm curious because you say you were raised Christian. Usually people say I was raised Catholic or I was raised Protestant or I was Presbyterian. So when you say you're raised Christian, does that mean it wasn't a specific denomination you were connected to?
I was baptized Episcopalian, and but pretty early on my mom, I think, became non-denominational,
Uh-huh.
and so started teaching more directly from the Bible and a more general sense of God rather than a fundamental view. So yeah, so I guess I would call it Christian. She's still very Christian and did the whole born again process and still follows that, and that's what she connects to. But I'm no longer part of an organized religion. I mean, I'm open to all of them and I respect all of them as paths to the same mountaintop, if you
Mm-hmm.
will.
Right.
Yeah.
Has that caused a division between you and your mother?
A little bit. And she has the best of intentions because her school of thought now is that if I'm not saved, then
Mm-hmm.
I will be going somewhere that's not very nice.
Yeah.
And to be saved, I need to do certain things that I no longer resonate with me.
Right.
So I try to have open conversations with her. I mean, I try actually to not talk about it at all, but it seems to always come up with her. Like I said, very well intentioned,
Uh-huh.
but very well intentioned. But I try to say that's just not where I am. I respect where you are. But yeah, it's caused a little bit of a riff for sure. I try to focus on the things we do have in common,
Yeah.
but yeah, like she's in that um, what's the word, evangelism state of
Uh-huh.
trying to help everybody. So
Right.
that's all she's doing. It just isn't helpful to me
Yeah.
right now.
So is your father in the picture at all?
Yeah. I was actually raised primarily by my father. My mom, the reason I talked so much about that is she was the religious one of them. And yeah, I'm very, very close with my father. His spirit, he doesn't really have a strong tie to an organized religion, but as he's gotten older, he's really softened and become more open to some of the concepts that I've been following for a while and seems to have some, I don't know how to describe it other than softness and warmth. Maybe it was with the first grandchild being born, but just more present and more in tune with everything.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's been really cool to watch that evolution happen.
Yeah. So I know from your book that you have twin brothers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, so was that where the first grandchild was born to one of them?
No, the first grandchild was actually a stepbrother. It's the same age as my twin brother. So there's six of us within 4 years, actually. I'm the oldest. And then
Okay.
my sister's the youngest, and there's a couple step in there. But yeah, three girls and three boys now.
Okay. So as the oldest, you're the role model for all of them, right?
Yes, which is scary, but
There's a weight on your shoulders.
A little bit, a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're all very close, though. I'm so grateful. I got very lucky.
yeah.
They're my best friends.
So this journey that you take us through in your book, uh, and you're very upfront about the fact that life isn't linear, and neither is your book. uh,
Correct.
and I think that's helpful. In your introduction, as you talk us through how you're going to lead us through this journey that we're about to take with you. And so we don't have expectations around it being linear or
Mm-hmm.
about, uh, I guess you could say it's as messy as life is itself, you know. Uh, but there's so many good lessons in there. So, just for the audience's sake, because I know that some of the book reads like a memoir, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you use your own experience to make your points, and then you back it up with research and let us
Mm-hmm.
know that okay, I'm not just talking off the top of my head. There's a scientific backing for this, and there's lots of research here. So maybe you could one talk us through what got you to the point of saying, okay, I've got to write this down. That what I have experienced is worthy of telling the world about it because there are lessons that I've learned that I can help other people learn, maybe vicariously instead of having to go through it themselves. So, what got you to that point?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. I've always been a writer and always had an idea, or not always, but for a long time had an idea of a book in my head and lessons that I wanted to teach. And I'm kind of a natural born leader in a way, and really wanted to figure out how to distill my experiences to help others. So the writing process for the book began long ago, from the moment I actually decided, okay, I'm gonna do this and commit to this. That was about 2 years ago. And I had just been through a really traumatic incident, which I reveal in my book. So I won't do a spoiler in case you're gonna read it. But
Well, I
it
read
was one of
it, so
yeah,
let's
yeah,
hope
yeah.
the
Well,
audience
I mean,
does, because
correct.
yeah, that traumatic experience just sort of I thought, boy, she's been through so much, and now she's got this other trauma to deal with too. That anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no. And I was kind of saying the collective you to the listeners, but I
Yeah,
really appreciate you reading my book. Thank you. That means a lot. And yeah, it was one of those things where it was just, damn, I'm doing everything right. And I really thought I had figured it out. And around the same time, I was going through a breakup, and it just felt like all the pillars of my identity had fallen. And I really had nothing else to do but write. And it was very clear, now you have no excuses. Sit down and
yeah.
write. And I went back to the Writer Center, which I had been to before in Bethesda. It's an awesome place. And I just started taking a bunch of classes again. Now I teach classes there. So it's a cool full
Yeah.
circle moment. But I just knew that that's what I was meant to do. And I went to Scotland and went to a writing conference there and learned how to write a book proposal, and just kept taking each next step a bit at a time. And I during that process kind of was at a crossroads of, I love writing, but I don't know if I want to put myself out there. And I thought about writing fiction, and I thought about being a ghostwriter. I thought about using a pseudonym. but something was telling me that I needed to be the leader of it in my own words and stop hiding. And it was all or nothing, as you see in the book. I couldn't tell some of it and not others. It's not fair to the reader.
Right.
And the reader can tell when you're doing that. So it was either like hide forever or be out in the world. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. So it was a very people ask me now how I feel about my book being out there, and people in my everyday life reading all of these things about me. And it does feel a certain way, but it was very, very intentional. And I thought about all of the repercussions before I did that. And I realized I'm more interested in the people that I'm helping and healing rather than the people who are going to judge me or have a negative reaction. So that's what it's about, really.
Yeah, I think that's such a healthy approach. Uh, and you have a quote toward the end of your book, just talking about the fact that you know you are there for the people who need you, and the people who don't need you, that's fine. They're on a different path, and that's okay. That's their path. Uh, but you're not out to please everybody, because none of us can please everybody. Uh,
Correct.
so you do what you can with what you have, and there's so much in your book. It's one of those thoughts is, when you're ready, the teacher will appear, and
Mm-hmm.
that's happened for you, but now you're happening for others in the same way. You're showing up for those who need you. And I have to say, right now, I'd like to read a list of your issues as you lay them out, just
Sure.
because they're in the book, they're public, so I'm not
Yeah,
saying anything.
absolutely.
But I
I
will leave
signed up for
that
it.
last trauma out. I won't mention that one. But
Okay. Okay. Thank
uh,
you.
so you had anorexia diagnosed as
Mhm.
what, around 12 or 13 years old, somewhere in there,
That's probably when disordered kind of eating started, but I was hospitalized and diagnosed when I was 18.
when you were 18. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that led to a diagnosis of being bipolar while you were
Yes.
hospitalized for the anorexia, right?
Correct.
Now, later on, you were also hospitalized for depression and suicidal ideation, but you described the breakdown that you had as a breakthrough. So could you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that breakdown and what happened there?
Definitely. I can, as I will try to put it in words as best I can. So I was working for the federal government and I had all of the boxes checked. Everything looked great on the outside. I had cleaned up my life a bit. I was about 1 year sober. And the drinking, I think, had really helped me stay at that job because it drowned the voices of, every day of that job, I just had this feeling of, this is fine, this is good, but you're supposed to be doing something more. You're supposed to be doing something more. And I would cry. Like, I begged to just be like everybody else and go to work and come home, have hobbies on the weekends. It was just so frustrating. Why isn't this enough for me? Why do I have to even think about it? I have an amazing job, work with great people, but it just wasn't a fit. So then when I got sober, that came more to the surface and I couldn't drown it out. And it's so hard to explain, but I just shut down and I couldn't get out of bed. I was involved in a lot of activities and work and in school at the time. So I was doing all the things probably to distract myself. And everything just came kind of to a halt. And I didn't know what was wrong. I just hated myself. I hated my life. Um, and I just wanted it all to end. The thoughts became too much to bear. And something in me said that's not the right choice to end it all. And I talked to my therapist and my sister, and she took me to Sibley Memorial Hospital, where I was treated for a major depressive episode and the suicidal ideation. And it allowed me to pause. The way I think about it is we're kind of on this hamster wheel. And when we're stuck in that, we can't really look around at the other things that are out in the world because we're just trying to keep it going. And I was able to stop the hamster wheel and step off and think, what is my life? Is this actually what I want for my life? And so I was very open to all of the therapy and all of the insights, whether they were life changing or not, and said, I'm going to do this. This is my life. I have to figure out what I'm meant to be doing. So, yeah, it was kind of this underlying nagging that just got to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah. So prior to that, because you talk about being sober at that point,
Mm-hmm.
there was this romance you had with alcohol and drugs and kind of living the life on the edge. There's a sense, when I first jumped into your book, I thought, okay, this is going to be about her trip through a 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that at all. As a matter of fact, my sense of your book is that it's there for anybody who is stuck, anybody who's depressed, anybody who's considered suicide, anybody who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know how to get their life back on track or moving. And
Mm-hmm.
there's such a broad appeal to it, from my point of view, that it is not just how to get sober,
Mm-mm.
but I know the 12-step program is integral to this journey that you were on. So how did that come about? What finally pushed you over the edge to say, okay, I need to get sober? Because you denied that for so long, which is typical of anybody who needs to get sober, to deny that they need to. So,
Oh, yeah. I clawed into that denial. I would do anything except get sober. So I guess that I started trying to control it and prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic. And everything in my life at that point revolved around drinking. It was, a slow progression into that. But I think the 20s are just tough for everybody. Certainly they were tough for me, just being out in the wild, in the real world, and not really having the benchmarks of school and everything your path laid out for you. And so, yeah, I started trying to control it. And then I went to see a therapist begrudgingly at my boyfriend at the time's request, actually ultimatum, not request.
okay.
And I was just so desperate at that point for love or outside validation or just something to make me feel better. So I went, and week after week, we'd have the same conversation. Alcohol is not the problem. There's something wrong with my brain, and that's why I drink the way that I do. Can you fix that? Has nothing to do with my drinking. And so little by little, I would come in and with my chaotic stories, and that was the common denominator. I was always drinking during those episodes. And he said to me, the only treatment I know to work is abstinence. And I said, I will never stop drinking. So we can take that off the table. I just want to be able to control it better. And he talked about AA, and I literally laughed out loud and said, I'm sure it's a great program for alcoholics, but I'm not an alcoholic. So that doesn't apply to me. Yeah. It was just my idea of an alcoholic was the homeless man under the bridge with the brown paper bag. I didn't know it came in any other forms. I was functioning. My God, I had a good job. I everything looked good for the most part, except for the people who were really close to me. And so eventually I just got to the point where I had this moment of clarity, just that I was running my life into the ground. And I didn't recognize myself anymore. And I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of asked myself, what's the end game here? You can't keep living like this. And I had this little voice that said, what if you can get better? And I just hadn't considered that. I had just thought I was doomed and all of these things. And so there was a little bit of me that wanted to live, I guess, more than wanted to die. And so I said, okay, I'm going to try to get healthy. I'm going to try to get better. And I made that decision, and I started going to meetings and continued my therapy and found other modalities of healing along the way. And yeah, I had to look at it at the time as I was taking a break from alcohol and seeing how that worked, because I just couldn't think about the future. And I still really go by the one day at a time mentality. I can't think about 30 years from now what I'll be doing then. So yeah, and I celebrated 9 years of sobriety in September. So
Oh,
it's been a wild
congratulations.
ride.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it funny that, well, I guess it's not funny. There seem to be a lot of different paths to sobriety. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I know somebody very well who had a huge problem with alcohol to the point of ending up on somebody's lawn overnight and then waking up the next morning and not knowing how he got there, uh, ending up with a DUI, uh, and still not admitting that he had a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
he was living with his mother, uh, and she just couldn't deal with him. And he was a mean drunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if there's anything it would have made his mother happy, it would be him getting sober. Well, she died, and like that, he gave up alcohol.
How interesting.
And it was as if he wanted to make her happy in
Yeah.
in the afterlife, you know. Uh, and it
That's
it just
beautiful.
kind of shocked everybody who knew him. It was like, who is this wonderful, giving, generous person who
Yeah.
who was there all along and we didn't know it, you know?
Right. Right.
Uh, and as you said, sometimes you appear just fine to the rest of the world, but the people close to you know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it. So I feel like there's a mystery here that I wanted to uncover, because you often talk in the book about having this government job, and you've mentioned here on the podcast that you had this government job. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, did she work for the post office, or was she was she the chief of staff for a senator, or somewhere in between? So, do
Sure.
you
Somewhere
mind
in
that I ask
between.
what is it that you did for the
No,
federal government?
no, that's fine. I was working at National Institutes of Health as an administrative officer. And I started out just through an admin tech program as a GS4. And then within those 7 years, just kept working my way to the top. And I had just gotten promoted before I stopped working there. That's everything looked great. I got up to a
Yeah.
GS 13. I was the leader of my, everything, like I said, looked very successful and shiny from the outside.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I was working for NIH.
Well, that makes sense with your background in nutrition and all of
Right.
your thoughts in that area.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple other thoughts and questions. Uh, but I wanted to let you know that you remind me of someone who's got a podcast, Danica Patrick. Do you know that name? Her podcast is
I've heard it. I've
pretty
definitely heard
intense,
it.
uh,
Okay.
and she was one of the top female race car drivers in the country.
Oh, yes, that Danica. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
gonna write that down really. Okay.
So her podcast is called Pretty Intense. Uh,
Oh, it's called Pretty Intense. Okay.
yeah. Uh, and it's
Cool.
one of my favorite podcasts. Uh, she's got a lot of good guests on there and pretty
Awesome.
interesting approach to things. But you remind me of her, so I just from reading your
Yeah.
book, I thought this is pretty
Thank you.
intense. Oh yeah, Danica Patrick. So there's a disconnect for me in that
Okay.
the title of your book
Hmm.
includes the word vigilante.
Hmm.
And that sounds like, all right, this is somebody who's strong, who knows what they want, who's going all out to get it.
Hmm.
And there's a little twinge of revenge in there somehow. That's what I think about with the word vigilante. However,
Hmm.
your approach in the book is so soft.
Hmm.
It's be kind to yourself. There's a lot of self-care and self-love in there. There's
Hmm.
take it easy on yourself. Do this in baby steps. And if you fail, that's today. Tomorrow's another day. Pick it up and go on with it. So how did you come to call the book what you call it?
A great question. So, vigilantes, I think that sometimes connotes negativity or revenge. For me, most superheroes, if you think about it, are vigilantes and taking it upon themselves
Mm-hmm.
to right wrongs or save people or help people. And so it was this idea of sometimes we do have to go through the darkness to get to the light. And it's not so much revenge against other people, but more a fight or a pursuit for justice for our souls. And so vigilantes kind of go against the mainstream. They stay watchful and aware. They don't just accept things because that's because I told you so, because society
Yeah.
told me so. We kind of create our own path. And sometimes that means darkness, but we're actually after light at the end of the day. Is that cleared up at all? Or do you need
Well,
more
it's,
explanation?
I guess I interpret that
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as what you're going against and is all the acculturation, all
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
things that have guided us and made us who we are that has to do with our parents and our culture and our peers and our teachers and whoever else has influenced us, that we've decided we need to please them.
Correct. That's it.
And so what it is let's turn that on its head and push all that away and discover who we are underneath that has nothing to do with all of that. So that's my
exactly
interpretation of what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, you got it. All of that conditioning. And that's why I am gentle in my book, because it's not, I don't think I think it's counterproductive to do that from a place of vengeance or a place of wanting to punish anybody, because we can only give what we've gotten. We only know what we know. And so it's more from a place of defending my soul and protecting myself than trying to get revenge on others, you know?
Yeah. So you have a number of quotes in your book. One of the people you quote is Esther Hicks. And I, for a while, was an avid follower of Abraham, known as Abraham Hicks, but Abraham Hicks really isn't the husband of Esther Hicks.
Right. It's Jerry.
That's a whole different story. Anyway, how did you find her? What got you into Esther Hicks?
How did I find her? It might have been recommended to me by somebody in the spiritual realm. I can't remember exactly how I came upon that book, but when I got sober, I just wanted to read everything and open myself up to new ideas. When I was drinking, I wasn't growing. I had stopped. I don't think I read a book for 10 years. I'm not even kidding. And so and I love learning. So once I was able to do that and sit down and read a book, I felt like I had some catching up to do. And so I just really appreciated that book. And like you said, it's a whole nother subject. And so that's one of the resources I actually recommend in my book, because I didn't have enough space to get into the whole manifesting process. But I said, if you're interested in that, here's where to go. And I think Abraham, Jerry, do such a good job of presenting that in an accessible way. And so if anyone doesn't know what we're speaking of, the book that I recommend is called Ask and It Is Given. And it's all about manifesting and the law of attraction. And it's a great, great place to start if you're interested in exploring that.
Well, you've certainly managed to manifest quite a bit. And
yes.
Part of that process involves listening to your intuition, and it involves keeping an eye out for synchronicities in your life. And putting those two together and letting your intuition guide you as those synchronicities show you again and again where you might want to be headed. So could you talk about that a little bit? What synchronicities in your life have maybe been the biggest guideposts for you?
Yeah. So the thing about synchronicity, I was introduced to that term when I started reading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, when I was getting really into writing. And I know it's a Jungian concept now, and I've explored it so much, but for anyone who's not familiar with the term, it's things happening that he puts it so much better than me, that you would think would have some causation, but they aren't related. So for example, if you see a sign or you meet up with someone when you normally wouldn't have under different circumstances, and you just know that this is some kind of divine intervention. At least that's how my interpretation of synchronicity. So to tune into that, I really had to understand the importance of being present and paying attention, because the synchronicity and signs are always happening, but are we tuned in to
Mm-hmm.
even notice them or listen to them? And so one of the biggest ones, I guess, was when I was in the hospital for depression and trying to figure out what the next step is for my life. Um, in art therapy, I had revealed that I just think I needed somewhere more calm to live. And I said, okay, that's great, but where? Where do I go? I had no idea, but I was also open to anything. And within the next week or two, St. Croix came up 2 or 3 times in conversations I overheard and conversations I was having. And I had never heard of it before, or at least not remembered hearing about it. And so I thought, I'm going to go check out this St. Croix place. And I went there for a few days. And then on my way home, bought a one-way ticket for 3 months later and
Before anyone could
moved to
convince you
St. Croix.
otherwise, right?
That was exactly it. No, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, Bob, because I knew once I got back to my program, if you will, I would think of a million reasons why I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I knew that. So I had to make that leap when I was in that state of clarity. Even though
Uh-huh.
everyone here saw it as opposite of clarity, I knew
Yeah.
it was my path.
Yeah. I ended up in Rwanda for 14 months from one
Nice.
of those kind of experiences. Uh,
Right.
and, up until, a little while before that, had never heard of it. Or I ended up starting this podcast because of it. And I didn't know what a podcast
Wow.
was when that happened. So I get it.
Amazing. And here we are.
Yeah. Uh, those synchronicities are so fun. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you just uh, pay attention and then maybe look at your intention and see how those mesh.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a word that you use in your book, and it's so, I guess you're such a writer. It comes out as this is somebody who knows how to write. Uh,
Thank you.
and The Artist's Way is one of my favorite books. I I do those morning pages every morning, and
Yes. Me
if
too. Me too.
I've been doing them for months. Doesn't always end up 3 pages now. Sometimes it's only 1.5. But
Mm.
it's a great way to get stuff out and get your day started and get organized. Uh, Proprioception.
Yes.
Uh, and when I think about your current work, because from your website I see that uh, you work with people not only with yoga and Reiki, but you also have. I'm not sure if they're retreats that you run or they're just workshops. Uh,
Workshops. I have run retreats, but primarily right now, workshops. Yeah.
okay, so do you work proprioception in with all of that in terms of including movement into
Oh, yeah.
what what those are all about? Well, okay, if I signed up for a workshop with you, and I know that one is 5 days, I think. So what would we do? What would you do? What's the group do?
So they tend to be pretty focused. Like the one I'm doing now, that's 4 days. It's a series of 4 Saturdays, and it is called Creative Spirit. And it's about, oh no, they changed the using or finding your authentic voice. And so what I like about that and having space in between is that people have a chance to really go back and apply these things to their real life. So I talk about morning pages, and I talk about a lot of different ways they can tune in, about how they can rely on their whatever they consider spirit or source energy, and how they can really tap into that and let go of the inner critic, like Julia Cameron talks about. I'm also teaching an Artist's Way course in 2025 that I'm really excited about.
So am
Um,
I.
you are?
I are,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway, go
amazing.
ahead.
So powerful. Yeah, so that's a long one and say I do writing workshops, I teach yoga, I do guided journaling workshops at the yoga studio that I attend. I lead goddess gatherings at the wellness studio I manage. And so I've really just tried to tap into multiple different ways to reach people, and
Hmm.
depending on where they are in their journey, and help them to see themselves and see the world from a fresh perspective.
Yeah. Now, given your background in nutrition, I was
Mm-hmm.
surprised that there's pretty much no reference to nutrition or
Mm-hmm.
diet in this book. And one, was that intentional? And two, is there another book that we can expect coming from you that is nutrition focused? Because a lot of your articles that you've written for different publications are nutrition focused.
Yes. Yes, you read my mind. Yes, it was intentional. I think that nutrition and food are some of the most difficult behaviors to change, which is why I'm so passionate about it. And I felt like I was introducing so many things at once that
Hmm.
I didn't even know where to start or begin with that one,
Yeah.
And I might have said something about health or taking care of your body or being more aware, but you're right. I don't say anything about nutrition. My next book that I'm working on right now is called Inner Space. And the SPACE acronym stands for Spirit, Physicality, Awareness, Connection, and Evolution. And the P in that is the physicality. So I will get more into nutrition with motorcycle with the next the next book. Yes, but
Very
it is
good.
something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, it just kind of surprised me because I know that that's near and dear to your heart, and it
Yeah.
just wasn't in the book.
Yes.
Okay, one of the recommendations in your book, and there are so many, but one of them is centered around habits and looking at what you do on a daily basis just out of habit, and then questioning why do you do that, but then also looking at habits that you might want to replace some of those habits with. For instance, a morning routine, and you have recommendations around a morning routine. So I know what your book recommends, but I'm curious to know, what is your morning routine now? What do you do every morning?
Sure. Great, great question. And I know there are a lot of recommendations in the book. And I just want to say that it's because I think different things resonate with so many people. So I wanted
Yeah.
to give a lot of options, but
Right.
it's in no way like a list that needs to be checked off.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. But yeah, so right now I journal every morning. That's just a non-negotiable. And I love it. I journal all throughout the day, actually, as much as I can. It's how I sort things out in my brain. And then I listen to a hypnosis, actually, that's 20 minutes. So I kind of think of that as my meditation. And it is personalized to me and customized by this man named Michael Gazzo, who does this rebirth breakthrough process through breath work and a variety of other techniques, neurolinguistic programming and mental and emotional release. And so I did all this work with him, and he came up with a really nice 20-minute meditation where he's talking and there's music, and he goes through my perfect day and this avatar that I've created for myself, and how I feel. I am this, I am that, I am a prolific writer, I do this, I'm with animals a lot. And so the idea is to really get that programmed in me and then become that. So it's part of the manifesting process and just a
Okay.
practical way to do that. And then I usually do yoga in the mornings as well.
Okay. Sounds like a
So
lot
that's
of
my routine.
affirmations there.
A lot. Yeah, because we have to change the narrative.
Yeah.
And hearing it
Right.
once or twice doesn't do it. We have to reprogram
Yeah.
because we have been telling ourselves, or at least I was telling myself, the same thing for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found that my morning routine has grown over the years. Like it started
Yeah.
out with just prayer and meditation, or as you put it in your book, asking and then listening. Uh,
Yes.
and then that grew to adding qigong to that routine, uh, adding a second prayer, which is a Reiki prayer, uh, and adding morning pages to it. So
Yeah.
so what used to be like a 15-minute routine is now an hour and a half routine. Uh,
Amazing. Amazing.
but what I like about your book is, you know, you always say just take it one step at a time. Start out slow. Just change this one little thing. Your example
Mm-hmm.
of changing a degree on your compass when you're walking, and then how different
Yeah.
that one little degree means if you're going from California to Maryland and you end up in
Mhm.
Baltimore instead of where you're
Yeah.
aiming for instead of DC. Uh, so uh, that was really all I wanted to say about morning routines is that
Yeah.
it's something that you can start out small, but you never know where it's going to take you. You know.
Definitely. And it evolves over time, as you know, and things change. And I might be doing something different a few months from now. I've found that the asking and listening for me usually comes up in the morning pages. Like
Uh,
I ask questions and kind of through the day try to listen for the answers.
yeah,
But everyone's so different, you know. Some of us are more need to watch a vision of something while we're a visual while we're meditating, or some of us see images, some of us hear things.
yeah,
So it's very different. And the one thing I want to say about the compass example and 1 degree to the left, when you trust your intuition, that's when the synchronicities happen, because that might not have happened had you gone this way and
yeah,
left instead of right, you know?
right,
So yeah, it's a pretty cool concept. But yeah, I try to be very realistic and practical.
yeah. Yeah, one of the other things that I've added is central channel breathing. And I don't know if you're familiar
Ooh,
with central channel breathing.
I'm not.
Uh,
No.
Dr. Sue Morter, who wrote the Energy Codes, and I know that's a book you got to read.
Okay. I'm writing it.
There's a lot of yoga in that book too, but
Oh, nice.
uh, it's uh, it's really a way to channel breath from the earth up through your body, up through your
Mm-hmm.
chakras, and then back down again, and opening up that whole central channel for energy to flow through your body. Uh, anyway, it's a great way to
No,
start the day.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'll
Yeah.
definitely look into it.
Uh, okay, one more thing I want to mention since you're into Reiki
Okay.
is the Northeast Reiki Retreat, which
Ooh.
which is in the Adirondacks every May. It's a gathering, a 3-day gathering of all things Reiki. Uh, and it's a place where you could be a vendor and promote your book. So
That would
something
be a great idea.
something you might want to
Yeah,
think
send me
about.
the details for sure.
So just go to nerr.com, Northeast
Okay.
Reiki Retreat, NERR.
That's
And that's the end of my suggestions. So we are, speaking
thank
of
you.
the end, pretty much at the end of our time. Uh, and at the end of each podcast, I always ask the guest to leave the audience with some words of wisdom. Now, your book is full of them, and especially right at the end of your epilogue, you give a list of some
Mhm.
good
Mhm.
wisdom. But I'm going to leave it up to you, whatever you'd like to leave the audience with, because this is your chance. So go for it.
Sure. Trust your truth. That's all.
I bet I
Trust
could
your
buy
truth.
a T-shirt with that on
You
it.
could. On the spiritvigilante.com, you might just see one.
There
Yeah.
you go, spiritvigilante.com. In the store, there are T-shirts that have "Trust Your Truth"
Yeah.
on them.
Yes.
And if you're female, the T-shirt shows your navel. So it's a short one, right?
It's a crop top. It's not too short though.
Okay.
That's funny.
Okay, well, audience, you heard it here. Take what resonates with you and apply it to your life. Put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.